Thank you for coping up with so much information download since the morning. Like Sheldon Cooper would say, there. This one will try and make it better, and this one will try and make it more interactive. That's my promise to you. Uh, I think my age might be equivalent to your experience. So a part of it is.
Just because I don't have hair and whatever is there is all white.
So I'm going to tread my path very carefully, but this is going to be a very interesting conversation because we're talking about two different worlds, and he's seen both, and rather he's been there and done that. So my first question to you is, there has been a lot going on about industry and academia has to work together. We have to collaborate, and that discussion has become a hot topic. What's your personal critical assessment of what's happening, what's going right and what's not going right?
You're right, so by the way, I am actually not an academician. I've been far away from studies right since my school days. And education is what my eighth sector, as I was telling him, of working. So I do not belong to the education sector by my birth in corporate world. I started with corporates, so this whole discussion, and you're right, it's been for years I've been hearing this, that industry, academia, employability gaps. Now, good discussions, years old, but in reality, if you ask me, how many people have actually gone into it or what's really happened out of it, I think there is miles to go. There's miles to go. And it's not just because of any one of the two. I think, and even in the previous discussion when they were talking about upskilling and reskilling and all that. So while the stated intent is good that we need to do this, the execution of that intent is where I see gaps, and I see gaps on both sides. If you look at it on the industry side, they want a superhuman whom they should recruit, but they wouldn't invest the time to actually work with the education sector to list out what, how, and when they need it, right? Now you look at the academia. Academia is even better. I mean, they want every one of their kids to get employed, but they will not go beyond and don't mind my saying this if there are any academicians over here, but they won't go beyond what you call as the UGC regulated curriculum. And they will not add or load to that what really the industry requires from you. The good part is there's only two of us, so I was telling him, this is a true fireside chat. The only fire is missing. It's a very simple funda. You take a kid, and I said this, God knows how many times, and I am most disliked in most of the education worlds I've worked in. You pick a kid who in the 11th and 12th, if not 10th and 9th, has slogged it for 12 to 14 hours a day, right? Be it for an entrance exam, be it for the board exam, and now this new animal called CUET. Now you take a kid slogging out 12, 14 hours a day, 2 years running, you bring him to a college, you tell him 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. Super luxury holiday at the age of 17 and a half or 18. And then you tell after 4 years or 3 years or 5 years, whatever the program is, employability is very low. Now you take someone, for him, it's like coming out of a lifelong jail into absolute freedom. And the moment you say that, listen, so let's take your company, for example, and we've been talking about some programs we want to do. Now, if I was to take some of those things on, data science, data analytics, risk, and I tell someone, okay, let's plug it into the curriculum. The first thing which you get to hear is the kid is already loaded. Loaded with what? From 12 hours, you cut down his load time to 5 hours. So where is the load? So unless those two divides on both sides get broken, we'll only keep on having discussions and fire chats.
No, I agree. I think there is correction required at both the ends, and I think there is awareness to uh, that gap. I also have a very interesting but a debatable, controversial question to ask. There is this undercurrent of blaming education for everything. I'm not this or I'm not that or I'm not prepared because the Indian academic education institution or system is defunct. And it's almost like a fashion. Like Bhagwan ko gali dena jaise fashion tha, it's almost like a fashion now. I want to understand your personal viewpoint on that. Is this worthy of the blame? And if no, then according to you, what is an ideal academic institution like?
Now you ask me ideal academic institution. So I graduated from BITS Pilani. My time, there was nothing better than that. For the simple reason, they had something called, it was a very brilliant phrase called zero attendance. Your attendance was not linked to whatever you did in the institute. आप class जाओ, class मत जाओ. You sit in the cafeteria, you sit in the open air cafeteria, you sit in the closed cafeteria. No one is bothered. Because at the end of the day, they said it's your responsibility as a student to clear your quiz, your test, and your surprise quiz, which the professor will tell you 2 days in advance. Tomorrow I am giving you surprise quiz. So that was your responsibility. And I tell you, if you look at it, so to me, on hindsight, I didn't realize at that time, on hindsight, you have this thing called self-starters. You don't need monitoring. I see a lot of my batchmates, guys who are a few years senior to me, guys who are a few years junior to me, believe me, they don't need a manager. They don't need someone to stand over their shoulder and say, kya kar rahe ho? So if you look at an institute, today, you consider an institute to be brilliant if the number of students going abroad for higher studies, or people getting into entrepreneurial roles, right? Or people getting placed in the best of companies with the highest of salaries. I am also a culprit to it. Yeah. All our ads, if you see, we're only talking about highest package. We're talking about 1 in every 3 getting above 10 lakhs. We're saying top 10% above 27 lakhs. I'm also a culprit to it. But the fact is, these are things which everyone wants to measure an institute with. In this whole process, and I've been thinking about this for close to about a year and a half. While I practice this with my team, I tell them only one thing. When you're recruiting someone, I said, forget everything else. Just look at, can the guy think? Now, when I joined Levers way back in '89, they had a beautiful phrase. It took us time to understand that at that time. They used to use a phrase called helicopter vision. So you can be in a situation and look at the situation from within, or you can rise up from the situation and, like a helicopter, actually get a much larger view. If you ask me what is a good education institute, I think one great skill which an institute needs to imbibe in the kids is this whole thing about helicopter vision. We talk about, very well worded things called design thinking. That's all English. The fact is, you need to basically have the ability to connect the abstract dots. If you can do that, then these technical skills or non-technical skills, anyone can learn. But what you can't learn is to think. And that is something I really don't see institutes really focusing on that. Also connected to what you asked, so people blame education. Now, why do they blame education? Because unfortunately, most of the people within the education system have decided that the guideline given to us must be followed in toto, and it's engraved in stone. I'll give you a very small example. 2 years, Coursera was struggling to get their foot in into Bennett University, right? And my only thing to them was, I said, listen, if you got brilliant certifications, you got brilliant courses, you got some of the brilliant ones, but if I as a university have to pay for it, I can't afford it. So I'll have to charge the kid. Now, if I charge the student, you face the other issue where you say, you've outpriced yourself as a university. Third choice is I leave it to the student as an option. That listen, these are 5 brilliant things which you need to do. These are the 20 organizations which are ready to recruit you if you do these 5 things. You leave it as an option. The kid, in any case, with the super luxury holiday experience is saying, yaar, mujhe class kyun jana hai? So you think he will do that course? He won't, right? It took us 2 years to really kind of just kept on hammering them. They've come up with a brilliant solution. Today, I've signed up with them for the next 3 years, where minimum per year, I can get 3,000 kids to do anywhere between 1 to 4, or even if the capacity is more, they can do more than that number of certifications within a year. And I pay for only 1/4 of them, right? Now I can afford that cost as a university. But if you tell me, afford a 20,000 rupee, I can't. Because what you need as corporate world or as industry is not inherently there in my curriculum. Because I am not living in the present with the industry. And if you really want to make it happen, see, end of the day, I think Mr. Bengali said, the distillery guy, your biggest resource is a human resource. Now, this country is full of that. Now, if we want to take this country actually to a 5 trillion, 10 trillion, there's no limit to it, then you really need to invest in the kids. And if you need to invest in the kids, then you need to go after it with your heart and soul. Then it cannot be left to blaming one and blaming the other.
Sure. Fair viewpoint. No, I think the Coursera point you mentioned, I think it's very valid. And in the other room, we were. Is my voice clear? Okay. In the other room, I was on a panel and I said that there is a lot of FOMO shopping happening, like fear of missing out. And it's happening in academia, it's happening in organizations because there is a glamorous product available, and LMS and LXPs are also being sold. Due respects to everyone outside, inside, everywhere. But and you also seem to be hinting at the same, that it's important to see where you are and who will take the burden of the cost. That cost incidence, in a similar breath, we don't want employees to bear the cost. We don't have sometimes sufficient spare money to invest because there is a comparative. Now, in all of this, the question which I have now for you is, some organizations have been looking at academia partnerships at different intervals. वो समय चला गया है कि, and let me call it the linear time, where I finish school, I go to corporate, and then I never look back. There is out of school, back to school, out of school, back to school, out of school, back to school. Which means every 5 years, there is a back to school for industry professionals. In my view, universities such as yours have a very huge role to play in employee life cycle. In that 15, 20, 25, 30 years of a professional career span, there is role at every 5 years. I want to know, how are you shaping up? What's your vision to partner with the corporates to bring them back to school?
So I'll tell you what my vision is or what we are trying to do at Bennett. I also want, one thing I want to make very clear, and this we were just talking about it off stage, that so while we all talk about upskilling, reskilling, and we need to do it because of the pace at which, and every industry, the pace at which it's moving. You see, it takes a lot to put that intent into practice. And I remember my corporate days. You want someone to get trained in a particular skill, but you won't give him the 5 days off to go and do that because you have a target to do, right? Now, I don't say you give a 1-year sabbatical to a guy to go and upskill and reskill himself. But I'm saying in the 365 days while he is working, slot that 2 or 3 hours, which is absolutely, totally his private time. Invest that 3 hours in the employee, and you won't have this issue. We started our, we're very young, we're just about 6 years old, so we started our alumni association a few years back, couple of years back. And what we've now done is that, and this is what we are trying to create now, we're trying to create a very contemporary kind of content and material and for across the sectors where our alumni are. And we are saying come back. Now, there is a debate going on, and many of us are of the view that we'll just do it. We don't want to charge anything to the alumni. But for me, as a single university, when I just do it for my alumni, how is it going to help the larger world? Right? So I think this whole thing of 5 years going in, coming out and all, that very soon may actually become 2 years or 3 years. No one says that, you need 3 months off, 4 months off, or 5 months off. Today there is a huge amount of programs available, whether it's from a higher education institution, whether it's from a Coursera, Unacademy, Udemy, whatever. It's a question of how strongly can you embed it as part of the culture and put it in the system. I'll tell you, hats off to a company like Levers, where I did my first 10 years. It was a given that in a year, anywhere between 2, if not more, training programs you will have to go through, come what may. Your boss couldn't turn around and say, "Iska target hai, so he can't go." The boss would get hauled up. Now, that is the strength of intent that you need to have. Right? On the other side, on the academia side, I think, and this is something else which we've done, which is more in line with, not just alumni and reskilling, but even for how do you prepare your current kids in the right direction for corporates. We've instituted something called an industry advisory board. We've got about 35 odd CXOs, CTOs, CEOs as part of that from across industries, from the likes of a Rolls-Royce to the IT industry on the other side. And primarily the focus, and Rohit is driving that, so primarily the focus on that is they look at the curriculum, they look at what's happening in their real world, and they tell us whether it's going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Now, our responsibility then is to take that and find a way to put it into the curriculum. See, today, unfortunately, I have a 21-year-old daughter, she's in her final year now. And this generation, unless you actually put it in your curriculum, they will not do. So on this advisory board, the other thing which we look from them is to actually have a chat with the kids to open their eyes to what the real world is. Okay? She just went back, she landed up back in US today, and before she was going, I was there in Bangalore spending some time with her. I was telling her only one thing. I said, there's this whole myth in today's generation that the day I graduate, I am a vice president. They are all born vice presidents. वो गलती हमारी है. They haven't traveled in a DTC bus. They don't know what is a cycle rickshaw. They don't know what's an auto. They were born in a car. They travel in a car. Anything outside of a car or, a non-AC environment is not acceptable.
That's true.
Right? So you got to look at some of these kids. He's getting a job. His total expenditure on a 4-year program would have been close to about, let's say, 15, 16 lakhs. He's getting a first job at about 8 or 9 lakhs. I don't like this job. It's not paying enough. I got the highest CTC when I graduated from BITS Pilani at 3,654 rupees a month. Party time, yeah. 3,650.
Was that allowed at that point of time? Worthy enough to show off on social media?
नहीं वहाँ पे तो यार like dislike physical होता था.
Equivalent, but
I keep telling these guys, there is nothing called a like or dislike when you're sitting in class. Similarly, on the parallel side, I tell the academician, there's nothing called a UGC or AICTE regulation when you actually get down with the intent of creating an excellent human resource. That superhuman I was saying, no? Corporates want a superhuman. वो superhuman create करना है, we have to break the shackles of these regulations. Regulation defines only minimum requirement. It does not put a cap on maximum.
Fabulous point.
They say 160 credits for BTech. Doesn't mean you can't have a BTech program with 200 credits. So we've done that. We've given an option to do an honors. We've given an option to do minors. All of this give you extra credits. This Coursera thing, because the kid is going to go get it free, I'm pretty confident 3,000 of them will do it. Right? It needs to happen. One of the suggestions which I can give is, and I tried doing this when I was in Manipal Group and I was in Dubai. According to me, one of the things which can really, really work, and it needs to work for the simple reason, when I joined Levers, we had a 1.5-year management trainee program. Now you tell me in today's world, which organization has a 1.5-year management trainee program? With the speed at which it's moving, they want you ready day -1. Right? They don't have time to invest and make you sit over there as a management trainee for 6 to 9 months and be unproductive. They want revenue coming out of you from the day you join. There's another hidden reason. The hidden reason, because I've been in corporate, is that no manager has the time to invest in a management trainee. Yaar, tum ye kaam karo, yaar, that's it. And he won't spend time in educating him. So if you want the kid to be day -1 ready, and I was suggesting this to many corporates over there, to me, the model looks like this. If it's a 3-year program, go towards the end of the 2nd year. Do your first level of interviewing. Get the right talent with the right intent. Then tell the institute, okay, in the next 1 year, these are the 3 or 4 modules or subjects or programs which he must do, must clear, get assessed, and the offer is completely done. So the kid is already on board, right? Kid pays for those 4 additional subjects. You incentivize him. After 2 years of stay over there, after 3 years of stay over there, you can always go on paying him back for what he did. Now, if you do that, what you're actually doing is you do not then need to spend those 6 months in trying to educate him on the job. You've cleared all that out in the last and final year. Whether it's a 3-year program, whether it's a 4-year program. I mean, that's one of the things I believe can be done. The rest I leave to the almighty.
But you've raised a point, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room. In the other panel we were talking about, there's a fancy word which has come, which is called as democratization of learning. And you know how corporates love fancy words. So everyone talks about democratization of learning, which means that people don't need to be told what to learn, when to learn, how to learn. And we're talking about a generation where they were always told what to learn, when to learn, how to learn. They've grown up in that environment. And suddenly, now the corporates would try and talk about liberty, freedom. And because of this conversation, I'm beginning to think that it's not the right way. So much of freedom can lead to anarchy. There is no possibility that वो जाके वही पढ़ेगा जो आप चाहते हो, जो उसके काम का है. So that structured learning still is relevant. Holding people accountable for what they need to learn is still relevant. Which raises a question, what is the fine balance between how much democracy is good? How much of a freedom can be offered to people? And that's a huge gray area. Huge gray area. Because on one hand, we want to be fair, we want to be flexible, we want to talk about democratization of learning, so we give them everything. But these are people whose brains have not been conditioned to use democracy, because these are people who've all their life been told when to do, what to do, how to do. So I want to take your last viewpoint there, that how do you marry democracy in learning and structured learning, if you have a viewpoint there, and then we'll take some questions from the crowd.
So let me be a bit naughty on this. I start with an example. Now, typically average increments range anywhere between 6 to 8%. Now guys slog it out for 12 months, pouring their heart out. For what? that I will get a 10, 12, 14, 15, 20% increment. And this is related to democratizing. So your team guy gets 8% increment, right? You have two choices. You can make him feel on top of the world with 8%, or you can make him feel like trash. It's how you're going to showcase that 8% to that team member of yours. So to me, democratizing education is how you portray it to be democratic. Okay. If you leave the whole world open, so obviously, yeah, I mean, the guy can do anything and everything that he wants, which may or may not be useful to you at all. But if you curate and actually curate the kind of things that you believe are going to be useful to the organization, whether in that guy's own department or in some other department or wherever, and then create in a democratic way, a bouquet of programs or things that he can do or she can do, you yet give him the feeling of having the choice to choose what he has to do. At the same time, you meet the agenda that you have as a corporate.
That's a healthy marriage. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Questions, tough ones only. Yes, please. Can somebody
Good, at
give him
least
a mic?
someone is asking. No? Otherwise, the funda is you've been so good that everyone understood everything, or you've been so good that no one understood anything.
Go ahead, sir.
Am I audible?
Sir, keep it a little close to you and it will be audible, sir.
Yes. Now it is audible.
Sir.
Because it was not working. So I was not audible. My question is in the continuity of the question asked. Present day is the day of proactive change. Number one. Number two, the pace of advancement and change is so fast. I am taking admission today. I have to complete my course in 4 years, and thereafter, after 2 years, I may get the job. And meanwhile, what will happen? What will be the change to the technology? What will be the change to the skills to work in the industry? In that case, this democratic learning is a compulsion or choice? It is, of course, it is compulsion, because if you have to maintain the pace with the change, then certainly you have to acquire the new skills. And on the other hand, industry is worried about what is to be done, and the person who is going for the training is counted as a head count, because I belong to a skill university and we are practicing the dual model, and in the dual model my student is coming to the classroom and then going to the industry. But intent of industry is totally different. What is my intent? In such a situation, what should be done? And it is a great challenge.
So it's like the responsibility lies on both sides. While the corporate, as I said in the beginning, what I'm calling as a superhuman, corporate wants a certain person with a certain skill set for what they want to do. Their responsibility also then is to invest time to define it and make it happen. On the other side, when you look at a university, if my intent, so it's a question of intent, okay? If my intent is I have to finish chapter 1, page 1 to chapter 15, page 250, to phir to ho gaya. We got to understand that a kid is joining an institute because the kid desires to do a degree and add that knowledge. If we understand that as academicians and we understand that as that is our intent, then believe me, you will not get stuck into that 12 hours a week teaching and 12 hours of research and 12 hours of this and 12 hours of that. Then you will go out of your way and say, ki boss, mere ko ye, I have to create this kid into an excellent human being, into an excellent resource, into a great potential leader. So it will work both ways. Now, whether you call it democratizing or not democratizing, the fact is, if there is a need, it needs to be defined well. If we understand the definition, then we need to execute it. And we were talking about NEP. NEP intent is brilliant. It's brilliant intent.
NEP is education policy, just for the
So
abbreviation.
in this new education policy, I mean, you can actually create the future for this country. The only issue is there is someone making the policy, there is someone who's regulating the policy, and then there's a third person who has to execute it. And all three of them are not on the same page.
And NEP is document, sir. It is just document presently.
No, no,
Again,
sir, I'll tell you,
it
there is
would
a
be
lot of-
intent. It would be intent.
Don't mind my saying this, that there is a lot of meat in that, okay?
Yes,
There are
yes.
nitty-gritty things which need to be corrected.
Yes.
Now this, we were talking about Coursera or this Unacademy or Udemy. Now you tell me, I mean, we all know that some of these companies are coming out with brilliant modules and brilliant certifications, right? But we will only take it as a credit course if it's in Swayam. I am giving you a driving license, but you can only drive in your driveway. You cannot go out on the road.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So our time is over.
Time is up, but can we take one last
We
question?
can have two questions, no problem, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Go ahead, sir.
Just in continuation to what that guy said, I think for each company, when we're talking about democratization and whether we should make it a mandate or not, we're talking about that there are upskilling options, go invest in it. And in companies that, like, I don't think the upskilling opportunities or the offerings are less. LMS, LXP, the world is out there. What we've been talking about, what that guy said as an intent, right? So people have upskilling options, but there's no upwilling. Like the willingness is not going up in order to indulge into that, right? And most of the people call it as a culture of learning. Like the culture has to be there, hence the upwilling will go on. What are your thoughts on that? Like we've been talking about that, how we can make things accessible, convenient for everyone to go by, tap onto it. But what's about, and to be very honest, I don't believe that mandatory thing is wrong. We are not trying to impose a barbaric rule on that. That is like saying in India that you can't litter. It's mandatory that you have to behave. I know it's a hard step, but it is important and it is betterment for that. So why not the mandatory training part or compulsion of?
There's nothing wrong in that.
Yeah, but why we are not doing it that though so strongly then?
No, it's a good point. Let me just, I'm going to add 2 bits here. Mandatory is not wrong. Everything mandatory is wrong, number one. Okay, applying a discretion to what needs to be mandate and then what happens. And that's the answer to that, that's a short answer to that question. The uptake is struggling because the causality is struggling. An individual needs to know, if I do this, what will happen in my life, what changes in my life, what changes in my career. If you're able to give people that kind of a visibility, which offers certain kind of a gratification, cuts down the ambiguity in my mind, and connects the dot, then learning makes sense. Right now, the challenge is that there is too much to do at work side, there is too many learning options, and the causality is not there. मेरी जिंदगी में इससे बदलेगा क्या और उसके बाद मेरे करियर में क्या बदलेगा? If you're able to give that clarity, people will have a very clear intrinsic reason to uptake, upskill themselves. If the clarity is not there, then they realize that yeah, कुछ भी कर लो, होना तो वही है जो होना है. And people get, that's the black hole of learning, where learning erodes. Okay? And that's why I say that the fact that everything is mandatory is a symptom that the uptake is not there. And because you know uptake is not there, we think that the only way to increase penetration is make everything mandatory. And that does lead to killing of curiosity.
See, let me just add one part to this, that you know what Ankit, you were saying, the guy doesn't know how will it help him or affect him, or where does it lead him to if he does some program. So that is where I look at it, same intent, differently, saying you would love to do something which you own. You have to create that feeling of ownership in that person, that he should want to do it. Okay, so there were 2 different things which were happening in one of my stints. There was an organization which had actually kept it as part of the KRA. They had given a set of certifications. They said, out of these courses, if you do, this much % of this will contribute to your KRA. The second thing which they did and wanted to do at that point of time was, they actually created what I was saying initially, that 2-3 hours a day. So they actually created a certain amount of time every week, which was left to the employee to devote and invest into those certifications. So you put those two together, it will work for you.
I just had one thing to add on to that.
Can we take one last one?
Just to round it up, I totally agree. It will kill the curiosity. But as what you said, we are the experts of learning and development. We know how it works. Probably they don't. What they want is what they're calling it out. But what they need, we may gauge it. Okay. And okay, the second thought just.
We have coffee. You and I can chat on coffee.
Sure, definitely.
But I like the point on ownership because that piece is important.
No, definitely. And just on that, and just thought on that, when you say now that we don't have time, like people watch they binge web series in a week, in a day. And when we talk about, do you have time for learning? No, I have so much work. Right? See,
You
that's
never
where the
have time.
compulsion may.
You never have time. You have to make time.
Exactly, the willingness is not there. That's what I was saying. But thank you,
Ownership
thank you.
आएगी तो time भी आ जाएगा.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Thank you, sir.
See,
Just to add
so
to
we'll give
that,
the chance to the
just-
two ladies now. We got
Yeah.
two raised hands. So
Yes,
the
yes.
last two questions from these two ladies now.
So just to add to what we just discussed about ownership and giving time, I'll give you an example from my organization. Because that was one problem I think I have seen throughout my career while I've worked with different organizations. And the solution I found in my current organization is that the leadership communicates it very strongly and empathetically that it is important for all of us to learn to survive in this VUCA environment, and for that we give you quiet Fridays to use for your learning, for something that you want to create for yourself and unleash your creativity. So that has come from top down. So that ultimately has created an environment where we all as employees feel that yes, learning is something that our organization is taking very seriously, and so do we take it. So
So very good. I have a question for you.
yeah.
How many of your leadership team is actually doing that themselves?
So, I am not at the level that I can actually give you the right answer or the right percentage of that.
I'll tell you the
But-
answer.
But
You
the
go
answer
check
is
that.
there in this question. In 30 seconds, let me tell you once upon a time.
Ownership तभी आती है.
So that is what I'm saying. It is happening. It is still happening, and we have seen that. But I won't be given. We'll be given.
It'll happen,
more
we
of
trust
fact.
you.
Yes, you have to be trusted.
Many years back, my father told me you should, many years back, in summer vacations, and I was in school, he said, अखबार पढ़ा कर, and I didn't listen. So next day, he said, तू तो पढ़ता नहीं, मैं पढ़ लेता हूँ. So then I saw him reading newspapers every day, and he would sit, and he would show me, he would show off, and make me feel guilty that मैं देख अखबार पढ़ रहा हूँ, तू भी पढ़ा कर. After 15 days, I started reading newspapers. And now, when you're saying this, you realize that leadership saying stuff, keep that
I'll give you
aside.
even a simpler one. Yeah.
Yeah, walk the
I
talk.
have this bad habit of smoking, right? And then you have your young nephews and kids and all those. आप cigarette पी रहे बोले, cigarette is very bad, very bad. Cigarette-
That's true.
सबको Friday off दे दो पढ़ने के लिए, लेकिन खुद पार्टी जाएंगे.
Fantastic. We are under pressure.
Last.
One last question.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I know we are running short of time. Actually, this is not a question, it's an observation what everybody has said here. So I do believe, whatever courses or whatever mandatory things we are doing for the kids in the organization, I think until and unless we will create temperament, talent is important. But along with talent, temperament is also important. And for creating that temperament, I think mandatory things are also important. And what you have already said, that only saying will not work. I think, leadership has to come and leadership has to make believe all the kids, in the organizations that, okay, this will work for you. And once, they will have this faith on their faith that this will work for them. I think whatever balance is there, that can happen. Thank
Very
you.
nicely summarized.
So my last sentence, so one of the key skills which is missing and which needs to be plugged in across the education sector is the skill to develop the urge to learn.
Absolutely.
That's a huge skill missing. We only talk about IT skills, Java, .NET, .NET, all that won't work here.
The
Curiosity.
attitude matters.
Okay, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a fantastic audience. Thank you so much for being there with me on the panel. It was fantastic knowing you, talking about so many things. And